Provision granting immunity to the president. C. Vance 140S CT at 2434. Thomas J. Dissenting. Quote, the text of the Constitution explicitly addresses the privileges of some federal officials, but it does not afford the president absolute immunity, end quote. The impeachment judgment clause merely states that, quote, the party convicted, end quote, shall nevertheless be subject to criminal prosecution. The text says nothing about non-convicted officials. Former President Trump's reading rests on a logical fallacy, stating that, quote, if the president is convicted, he can be prosecuted, end quote, does not necessarily mean that, quote, if the president is not convicted, he cannot be prosecuted, end quote. CEG NLRB versus Noel Canning, 573 U.S. 513 589, 2014. Scalia J. concurring, explaining, quote, the fallacy of the inverse, otherwise known as denying the antecedent, the incorrect assumption that if P implies Q, then not P implies not Q, end quote. Another important clue is the clause's use of the word, quote, nevertheless, end quote, as in, quote, the party convicted shall nevertheless be liable, end quote. U.S. Constitution, Article 1, 3, Clause 7, emphasis added. The meaning of, quote, nevertheless, end quote, according to a contemporaneous 18th century dictionary is, quote, notwithstanding that, end quote, which in turn means, quote, without hindrance or obstruction from, end quote. 2. Samuel Johnson, a Dictionary of the English Language, 200, 216, 1773. The impeachment judgment clause contains no words that limit criminal liability, and to the contrary, it uses, quote, nevertheless, end quote, to ensure that liability will not be limited, i.e., quote, hindered or obstructed, end quote, even after an official is impeached, convicted, and removed from office. The text of the impeachment judgment clause reflects its purpose to allocate responsibility between the legislative and executive branches for holding impeached officers accountable for misconduct. In 18th century Great Britain, impeachment could result in, quote, capital punishment, fine and ransom, or imprisonment, end quote. 2. Joseph Story, Commentaries on,